Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today's episode, we're joined by James Fulton, who's the Chief Learning Officer at Goldman Sachs. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here. I'm great. Yeah, how are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's quite rare to see someone in the office.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but it's great to be here, although there are not that many people here, but it's you just to feel the energy and connection with other people, even though we wear a mask almost all the time. It's so great to be with others. And you're in your office too, I think.
Yeah, I'm in the office with the team. It's kind of you just made a good point there. I think you said collaboration or something like the energy that for me, when I have it in terms of like ideating, having conversations around innovation, product, and I kind of feel like I have to be in the environment with the team, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's hard to do those kind of have those conversations over Zoom. I just struggle for those. But you are right; it's quite a strange environment. Are we working like a WeWork type setup, where there's 200 offices or companies in the same building, and it's like a one-way system with masks? So it does feel quite strange. It's quite strange. Yeah. I think the benefits of being together in those moments are super powerful.
Yeah, I think many of us are realizing quite how either introverted or extroverted we are these past few months. It's held a mirror up to our social selves in that way.
Yeah, and I think also the other part of it is that my wife just wants to get me out of the house. She's like, "Do you want to go to work today?" Okay. I'm like, "What are you trying to? Maybe you should just work from outside."
Okay, the most powerful sort of feedback.
Yeah, the
feedback that cannot be ignored.
Yeah, and also there's only one home office. So that way she gets the home office as well. So it's a compromise.
It's a compromise where she gets what she wants.
Yeah, that's normally the compromise. That's normally her version of a compromise as well. But yeah, well, it's been a while since we last spoke. What, a few months or a few weeks? It kind of feels like time's flown since we last caught up. How what have you been up to since we last spoke?
So focus on a couple of things. Here at Goldman, we're rethinking performance management and the role of managers. So work that's been a big focus. The other big focus here is focusing on leadership pipeline and building the health of that leadership pipeline, rethinking the way we think about succession, let's think to leadership development. So those are two big areas where at Goldman, which announced a new strategy at Investor Day at the beginning of the year, those are two important priorities for our people function. And then I'm also actually beginning some writing and some thinking more broadly about actually the field of learning and leadership development. I've been at Goldman for 10 years. Before Goldman, I was an external consultant, both in the public and the private sector, for about 10 years as well. And so just making some observations and reflections on kind of where our field is heading. Because it's obviously a pretty tumultuous time in the world and therefore in our field. Corporations are part of the world, of course. The work we do is part of how some of these bigger trends are affecting our work. So that's what's keeping me preoccupied, apart from getting feedback from my wife as well about where I could work.
Yeah. Just like, what you mentioned, leadership development, what drove that conversation internally to rethink your approach to leadership development? I
think there are two things. Firstly, we got, as I say, a new strategy that's focused very clearly on growing shareholder value. We've articulated a purpose of the firm for the first time, a set of values and a strategy. And so, as with any rethink of an organization, we rethink what's the role of leadership in that. And so we want leaders to be, the traditional model of leadership at Goldman was someone who would be, we use the word culture carrier. So someone who would develop the culture. We have a strong apprenticeships culture. So a strong culture carrier, a strong kind of apprentice developer, and then someone who's very, very client focused. And those were some of the core ingredients of being a leader. And actually, we still love those qualities, and those are still important, but it's not enough. We want to have leaders who can operate at larger scale, who can build and run platforms. Running global teams is also going to be more and more important. I mean, not least because of what's been happening these past months, but even before that, just operating at a bigger scale, more of organizational leadership. And then the other drive, of course, is diversity, to make sure that we have a really diverse pipeline of leaders in all senses. And so those are some of the drivers that's probably the main driver to help us rethink about our leadership development. The other is that just structurally, the way we thought about leadership development was quite compartmentalized. We did succession planning over here, we do learning over here, we did leadership executive development over there. And so we want to bring that together. So those are, it's really about our strategy, but there was some internal opportunities for more consistency and collaboration as well.
Has that focus changed given current events in terms of the kind of roadmap you set out as a team? Has that shifted since?
Actually, if anything, it's accelerated. It's underlined that. because many of the features or the capabilities or the qualities that I described are only more relevant now in this world where we're working. Obviously, the need for agility, the need to manage diverse teams, the need to create cultures. If you're not in the office, if you're not all the same team, so leading at scale, building platforms, those things are just as important as they were.
Especially now everyone's at home. What did the program rollout look like from a practical sense?
Well, the work we're doing around leadership development, partly that was we were reviewing and kind of upgrading our succession planning processes and practices. So that wasn't a large rollout, broadly. That was really for the executive, really the senior executives of the firm. The things we have been rolling out, as many of my peers and other organizations, our work around, virtual working, resilience, and of course, diversity. Those are, diversity and let's call it agility have been the two superordinate themes of the year. And like everyone else, we've made a significant shift to Zoom, we've actually produced more materials, whether it be videos or handouts. Probably in some ways, the most impactful have been small group peer coaching circles, but conducted over Zoom, virtually. And I think that the reason that's been so powerful is because I think the opportunity to connect and have dialogue has been, I think, more powerful, certainly this year than any other year, certainly as powerful. Because we're dealing with two situations, both in terms of health and society and in terms of race and society, where there's no easy answer. They're not problems that can be quote unquote solved. They're situations that need to be improved. And so taking a mechanical approach to learning, as in, here's the model implemented, works for neither of those situations. The answer is really in dialogue. And so the peer coaching that we've set up, mostly internally, but for some clients, some situations with clients, has been very, very powerful.
It's interesting to your point, and I'm sorry for everyone that listens to the show because I've said this a million times, that throughout this whole, the last crisis over the past few months, both social, coronavirus, et cetera, even though we've kind of been pulled physically so far apart, I feel like we've come closer together. We're having there's more vulnerability, there's more transparency, there's more authenticity that I'm seeing from both organizations, but also friends and family, because we're kind of all in this together. No one's immune, apparently, apart from Donald Trump. But no, everyone else is around this. Is that something you've experienced? Do you feel like that you have you've gotten to know employees and level?
Yes, but not only that. I do think that's right. Some of the concerns that many of us have and that are written about the effects of social media, they limit our the information that we access and the people we hang out with online. So, there's a lot of literature in our own experiences. We tend to follow people who think like us, read magazines. And my concern is over the past 6 months that the closeness, let's call it maybe tribalism or community, pick your word, but that closeness has been replicated in the offline world. So that which existed online has now bled into our offline world because of the lockdown, because there's so few people at work, we're socializing so much less. And so I do agree, Chris, that has occurred. And I think that's not necessarily a good thing. I think the risk is that, an old boss of mine used to use the expression, we breathe our own exhaust. I think the risk is that actually in coming closer, we're becoming less open or less competing ideas are less available to us, and we're therefore becoming less open to them. And so I think that the polarization of our society and our thinking is something we need to watch for.
It's super interesting because that is a danger, isn't it? You go on social media and it's just a reflection of whatever you consume. So if you, Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, it just shows you more of what you want to see.
Yeah, I think that's that's in the innovation literature, and it's also to some extent our own lived experience is, being consciously looking for alternate experiences, alternate viewpoints. So over the summer, I chose to start reading novels that are authored by Black women, on the basis that I could probably count with one hand and maybe candidly one finger the number of novels I've read by those authors up until this year, when that, of course, it's important to all of us, but this year it's become even more kind of front and center. That was partly for my own education, about ongoing education about the topic of race, but there's also an explicit attempt to hear a viewpoint that I would just not otherwise heard, both by the demographic of the author, but also by reading fiction as a different lens into our field and what we do, not getting caught up in just our literature.
How do we encourage that in curiosity, or how have you done that internally to encourage your employees to do that? Is that something you focus on the team? I know I spoke to one of your colleagues, Simon Brown, about curiosity. Is that something you focus on with the team?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it's and I guess I'd say a couple of things for us. We do teach it, and our point of view is that it doesn't need to be taught. It's already there. As in, our point of view is that human beings are innately curious. Mm-hmm. So it's like you don't really need to teach somebody how to love or how to be curious, or actually
you need to speak to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old.
Exactly.
my daughter is naturally curious.
Exactly. And actually, when you're present and grounded, you are open and curious. We use the word open. So in our leadership development, we talk about that actually as a foundational concept. And the way we teach it is actually by coming back to the breath. So our point of view is that if you're here now, if you're present and grounded, then you will naturally be curious. And so part of the job as a leader is to be present themselves and to encourage an environment where others are present. So for us, curiosity is one of the benefits of presence and openness. So actually what we speak about are those concepts.
Love it. To the title of the episode, obviously what it takes to be successful in this new world of work is quite a broad topic, but when you think about that, what immediately comes to mind?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is the answer new? I mean, do you need something different to be successful in this new world of work than you did in quote unquote the old world of work? If you read management handbooks or old Harvard Business Review or other articles from the 60s and 70s, a lot of the ideas written about our field have been around for a while. And so I don't know, and I think our industry is very good at packaging up old ideas as some new ideas.
Yeah.
But actually, we've just been discussing an idea, that's actually, you might say, timeless, certainly very, very ancient. The notion that openness and presence and curiosity should be beneficial. So I think the first question is, what is different? And I think what's different, the short-term pressures faced by corporations, and of course this year, I would say the short-term pressure. So there's, I think, a time horizon that's different, and I think there's a spatial horizon that's different. Which is to say, I think now you have to be considerate of more things than you did. So I think in the past, if you had talent, if you did a good job, and you worked the political system, as in you were seen to be doing a good job, then that would kind of be enough. And that, by the way, those aren't two small things. There's quite a lot even within there.
Yes.
But now what we're faced with is those things are true, but the short-term pressures on the corporation means that actually your ability to perform and do a good job on a shorter time cycle is more important. And the other thing that's more important is, when I say about the horizon, is we've just been talking about race. It's much more important now, I think, for every executive and aspiring executive to be informed and to be developing on that and other social issues. As in, the role we play in work is broadening. So I think those are the two. So there's a kind of question of time and there's a question of space. I think those are the two things that are different, and some of the old constants still remain. And so there's more complexity. And I can talk more about any and all of that, but actually does that make sense? Do you agree?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I can't remember who it was. I spoke to a CLO recently, and if you're listening, let me know in the comment section. They said to me, Chris, the secret to my success is that we're boring. I said, what do you mean? Yeah. It's like no one else is trying to reinvent the wheel, whereas we're kind of doing these things to a very high standard, and we succeed that way. Where other people see it as innovation, in reality, it's actually, like you've just mentioned, these things have been around for centuries in some cases, and we just do them to a very high standard. So I completely get it. And quite a few people agree with you in the LinkedIn. Maria said such an important point that you just made there to ensure people keep exposing themselves to competing ideas. Definitely, Maria. And then Sebastian said, could it be that we do not need new ideas, but rather better ways of implementing them?
I don't know if it's either or. I think
I know, that was my initial thought. I think
Yeah.
you need new ideas and you need better ways of implementing them.
Yeah, it's both. And by the way, they go hand in hand, because once you implement something, the implementation itself can be a very generative experience. You know, we tend to think about innovation and execution, but actually those things are blended. You know, while you are executing, you learn. You know, execution is sort of mindless activity.
That's how I learn. I always say it to people. They say, "Oh, do you learn?" I learn I learn the most during execution, if that makes sense.
I mean, if you make an omelette, you'll learn during the making of the omelette
how to make an omelette. Yeah.
And hopefully, you know, if you're adopting a certain mindset, that will be a very developmental experience for you.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's one of our beliefs that as a profession, we should be more focused on how do we make work itself developmental, rather than taking people out. One of my colleagues and friends rails against skills that learning as recess. He's American. He says, why do we take people away? Let's make, you know, the work itself developmental. So so I think it's this, I think they're two sides of the same coin, actually.
I love that, the point you just made, because that's something that I always felt disconnected from learning and in school and I didn't
exactly. Yeah.
It's like when I came into the workplace, I fell in love with learning because I was learning as I was doing it, and I was like, oh, this is what learning is.
Yeah.
Seeing the fruits of the labor of the learning, and it became an obsession. Originally, it was in sales, because my little quote on my top of my monitor was, "The more you learn, the more you earn." But to me, that actually was an actual fact, and I fell in love with learning because I could see the progress that I was making. I mean,
let's hope for us and everyone joining this call that that's true. The more you learn, the more you earn. I mean, that would. But I think school is an unhelpful model. And I don't want to get into our schooling system, but you're right, because I think having been through school, you think you know what learning is, and then you grow up and you realize actually there are many forms of learning, there are many ways of learning. And by the way, there are many reasons to learn. And what I mean by that is this: see, we tend to think, I think, especially in corporations or corporate life or organizational life, we tend to think of learning for skills. And learning for skills, you know, learning how to do something is, of course, a key part of why we would learn at work, why we learn in life. But at work, there are two or three other reasons to learn. You know, one is behavioral, which isn't necessarily the same as skills. You can know how to do something. It doesn't mean that you're skilled at doing it. So skills, behavior. I think you can learn for culture. So if you think about skills and behavior, that's a pretty individual exercise. But if you think about culture, that's a social exercise. I think the most powerful form of learning is actually social. And my own experience as a coach, as a teacher, as a facilitator, is that one of the most powerful benefits of learning in organizations is actually a social benefit, and social and cultural. So I think we can take an explicit look at that. And I think the last reason we can learn is a strategic reason to learn, which is to say, not what do I need to learn or what do we need to learn, but what is this organization, or what is this country, what does this system need to do differently? You know, we need to be more, you know, you might argue we need to be more empathetic, or we need to be more decisive, or we need to be more agile. Actually, those are strategic capabilities. And if we think about that question, that's a big and complex and hairy and difficult question. It's actually I think a higher order question than a question of kind of skills or behavior. And I one of the things I'm going to be writing about is, why are we asked as learning professionals often to kind of address let's call it the lowest level of that chain? Why are we asked, could you teach person the skill of feedback, rather than the higher order of the chain, which is, can you help us as an organization to become more transparent or more supportive or more empathetic? No doubt there's a skills component, but not only a skills component. And so I think this question of kind of learning and how we think about learning needs to be challenged within organizations.
Yeah. First off, I love your point you mentioned around the cultural element of learning and how it makes us more engaged and brings us together. Over the past few weeks, we've been on a journey as a team to improve our own mental health and well-being as a collective team. So we're doing like workouts together. We're even going shopping together to buy food for the week. And over the past few weeks, I feel like there's this energy and this connectivity amongst my team members, because we're all bonding around this activity, or going to the gym, or going for a workout together, etc.
Yeah.
We're learning these new skills. You know, that we've got a number of employees that it's their first time in the gym. and they're learning this new skill, and we're bonding over that. So I feel like I can definitely relate.
That's fantastic. I don't want to cut you off, but just as I use that word energy, for me, that is absolutely central. You know, the word learning, I think because of school, we tend to think of learning quite narrowly. Actually, I think if you think in terms of kind of growth or creation, the notion of energy is a great leading indicator that learning is occurring. If you're feeling more energetic, it's likely that learning is occurring or is about to occur. It actually goes back to our earlier, because you're in the mindset where you're more open. So that's really, I think, so we need to change our language and the way we think about, think more broadly about this.
Question you've probably been asked before, and can you motivate someone to learn, or is it really about creating the right environment that facilitates learning?
Yes, you can motivate someone to learn, but I think about motivation the same way I think about curiosity, which is that I think a helpful starting point is to assume that human beings are intrinsically motivated. There's been a lot of talk about motivation. There's often a lot of talk about motivation. I'm just as interested in what's demotivating. As in, let's not assume that this person is a bit like a mat that needs pumping up to put in the swimming pool. And my job as a manager is to pump this person up. Let's assume that they arrived in this world fully pumped. And so what's interesting to me is, well, if they're not pumped, what's getting in the way? What's demotivating them? I think if we focus more on how do we get rid of demotivators, that may be a more effective avenue than how do we think about motivating. Working for a bad boss is a lot worse than it is good to work for a great boss. And there's that something bad is stronger than good. Like, I think stopping demotivation is more important than learning how to motivate. And so to motivate someone to learn, I think that's where I start. It's actually what's getting in the way with it. Why would you not want to learn? I think is a helpful starting point. How has the current landscape shifted the work that you and the team doing
in terms of now everyone's at home, everyone, all over the world in different circumstances, they're working different hours in many cases, but depending on their circumstances, how are you making sure that you can support the learning of your employees in this new virtual world that they're operating in?
I think there are fundamentally three things that are different: the what, the when, and the how. So what people want to focus on is different. There's more demand for help with management, help with resilience, help with leadership, help with diversity. I would say there's even more demand. I mean, those are kind of classic issues, but this year that's the what. The when is there's demand, I would say, all the time for that. Whereas before there'd be kind of periodic, okay, we're in performance review season, help me with this. Or, I'm about to see a big client, help me with that. But now the rate of change is such that there's just much more demand. And the how, of course, is people don't want to go to a program and not able to go to a program or at least sit in a room physically. So across all those dimensions, that's changed. And I think, by the way, that's a good thing, because back to our earlier conversation, I think it's shifting learning away from this kind of thing that happens over there separate to the business, more to an answer and a solution to what we're dealing with now and an opportunity to deal with it. Like I said earlier, I think when we get learning right, it's energizing, it's connecting, and it's powerful. And those are three attributes we need this year more than ever.
It's actually a very interesting point you made, because typically this learning would happen in the workplace, which immediately creates a different type of dynamic. But because you're learning at home on your own time, in your own way, whether it's a video, audio, podcast, whatever it may be, do you think that's changing people's relationship with learning? The fact that it's not happening in a traditional work setting or in a physical face-to-face classroom setup?
Yeah, I don't know if it is, but I think it will. As in, I'd be curious to know what others think. I don't know of the part. It would be easy to say yes, because I think we tend to have recency bias. So we tend to look at the past few months and think, well, that's the way it's going to be. And I don't know how it's going to be, but I do think there's no going back. As in, I don't think we're going to go to a world where we've forgotten that we've interacted in this way and learned with this way, and we'll go back to our traditional model. And for that reason, I do think it's going to change, and there'll be more focus on, learning, not just learning in the moment, but learning as an energizing force, in the way that you were describing your team just a few minutes ago.
A hobby. But learning for me is a hobby, and when I explain to people, some people do different hobbies. One of my hobbies is learning something new. The problem I'm having now, which is something I'd love to hear your feedback on, is I'm actually consuming too much content but they're not actually having time to execute. So what I'm having to do is cut down the amount of podcasts or things I listen to and focus on just a few things at a time, and then execute on those. Because it's one thing knowing something. We all know how to stay fit and healthy, but not many of us are fit and healthy. It's the execution part. So I'm trying to find this balance between consumption and learning and execution, and then seeing the results. And I really struggle with that. I always have. You mentioned you're doing a lot of writing lately, and a lot of thinking about kind of the future of the learning space. Has the current event shifted your thought process, or again, you said it's accelerated? Where do you think we're going to be 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, it did, and then it didn't. It was interesting. I mean, I want to write about a couple of things. One of the things I want to write about, and we've talked about this through this conversation, is, in my view, there's too much focus on the individual in organizational learning, and there's not enough focus on learning as a social event, an energizing event in the organization. Number one. Number two, there's not enough focus on understanding the effect of context on individual behavior. So it's almost as though the psychologists, and by the way, we have psychologists at Goldman who are fantastic. I'm so proud of them. They're great. But I think in our field, there's too much weight on psychology, and there's too much weight on understanding the individual. We need to shift that. So let me give you just two examples. One is the effect of power on an individual. A person in a position of power, there's a lot of very interesting, shocking literature on, for example, if you have more power, you're more likely to think the rules don't apply to you. So there's a very interesting study, for example, of someone looked at what are the type of cars that are more likely to run red lights. And guess what? It was more expensive or larger cars. And it's a kind of comical example, but the serious point is, if you have more power, you're more likely to think the rules don't apply to you. And there are many other insights that we've learned about the effect of power, and I think that should be taught more regularly as part of management and leadership training, because being a manager and leader is having a position of power, and that's an example of the context affecting the individual. So that's the other. When I say too much focus on the individual, that's the other thing I mean. We need to look more at context, an example of which is power.
I don't think anyone's surprised by that research as well, unfortunately. And
we're not, but we don't teach it. It's not on many of the curriculum of leadership and management in organizations, and I think it should be.
Yeah, and to the other point, there's a point in time I was thinking about this for a while of why I excelled when it came to learning in a group environment versus school. So let me explain what I'm saying by that.
Yeah.
When I was in school, I was part of multiple team sports, whether it was ice hockey that I played with Jane, my co-founder, or basketball. And that's learning a skill, very technical skills. Yeah. And I would excel beyond belief in these environments. Whereas when it came to Chris's individual learning, as you just, I really struggled. Yeah. Whereas if I fell over on my face on the ice, everyone else around me was also falling on their face on the ice. Yeah. But we helped each other through it. And we guided each other. And we had a coach, right, literally, in the sports team to help coach us through it. And when I came into the business environment, that helped me. That helped me transition over. I saw my manager as my coach because of sport. Yeah. And I saw my colleagues as not I need to compete against my team, but we're in this together. Yeah. If I'm playing ice hockey or basketball, I can't score every goal or win a game on my own. So that naturally made sense. So when you talk about learning as a collective and as a group to build culture and engagement, I completely resonate so much with me. But you are right, in an organization, in most organizations, it's the individual that we focus on.
It's the individual, or I think the most common group is team building, which I personally have become not allergic to, but
what do you mean by that?
Well, actually, what you're describing, even as in your sports example and what you described earlier in your example at work, my guess would be that as a result of all that, your team was much stronger. The spirit of the team is much stronger.
Yeah, because it's about the collective, not the individual.
And that, to me, as you described, what I heard was that's an outcome of you having learned and performed together. It wasn't an input. As in, you could have started by saying, let's do a team building exercise. And
we never did them, really. It was just that's our daily operation of how we just worked together was built around that. It wasn't like we need to do a session around it.
Yeah, if we go back to what I was saying earlier about learning for skills or behavior or social or culture, team building is like the most basic request you can make of a learning professionals in respect of a team. I think much more interesting is, what is this team, what do the stakeholders of this team most want this team to learn? What is this team most, and what do the team have most energy for learning? Like, that's focus on that. That's how you build the team. Don't take them away and have that's fun. It's great, no doubt. But I think that's looking through the wrong end of the telescope. I think the team will be built as a result of that. It's an outcome, not an input.
Yeah, and I think what I found about that is, naturally, people that came into our team, it became part. They joined our learning culture. So even if they came from a different team or unit in the organization, they naturally, because everyone on a team was, we had a bookshelf that everyone added different books to that they were interested in, and people would share it. And I didn't start these things, by the way. It just kind of just went, and then, or if a new person joined the team, without me even having to say anything, various team members would be drawn to them to say, look, and help them out, or to learn the new system, or our new process. Yeah. And anyone who came into the team kind of became part of that culture, of like the learning culture that we had. And that's where, and I used to get, I used to get in trouble for this, James, in the business, where I would go for I would say, okay, everyone stop working. Let's go for a walk together. We need to reset, or let's go for a run, or let's go gym after work. And my management team at the time would say, they're not your friends, Chris. You're their manager. Why are you doing all these things with them? And I was like, because we're learning together, we're growing together, becoming stronger, and look at the results, the numbers. And we were the high, we were actually generating the most revenue in the business. Yeah. It was a far cry from the typical, we have to do this training on this day, and it's structured, and it's in a classroom, and but it just felt right for me. I'll be honest, I would be lying if I said there was a process and there was a strategy. There wasn't. It just felt right. It felt like the right thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and it had results. And by the way, learning is a great, in my opinion, underused leadership lever, which is to say, when he says, oh, but hang on, you manage them, you're their boss. Actually, learning together or creating energy together is a super way to help you as a leader, but also help the team.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, James, if there's sort of a parting message you give to your other learning and HR colleagues out there, what would that be? And where's the best place for them to connect with you if they want to say hello and reach out and just have a chat with you?
I guess stay present, stay open. And if they want to reach me, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to hear from you guys.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks
for the invitation, Chris.
No, it's been a pleasure, and look forward to hopefully catching up face to face soon in the near future.
Yeah, at some point. Look forward to that.
Yeah, you're not even too far away from me, so I've got to come say hello at some point. But thanks again for coming on the show. For everyone watching, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, comment, and share, tagging colleagues that you feel will benefit from the great knowledge and experience. If you're new to this, you can head over to hrdealers.com/subscribe and subscribe via any of your favorite podcast platforms as well. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, and look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Bye for now. See you later, James.
Bye.